Chairman and members of the committee. My name is David Downy. I'm the Vice President of Flight Safety for Bell Helicopter Textron. I was the manager of the Rotorcraft Directorate in Fort Worth, Texas for 7 years prior to assuming my new position at Bell Helicopter. The events leading to the Eclipse 500 problems are complicated. Eclipse was a brand new company trying to make a big splash in the aviation industry. The CEO, Vern Rayburn, created a very public and well-documented awareness. This is a company that wanted to gain its type certificate, its production approval, and start delivering aircraft all within 15 days. No amount of FAA coaching would dissuade Eclipse executives that this feat was not practical and overly ambitious. The FAA was concerned at the turnover in Eclipse technical personnel. There were also technical setbacks, including having to re-engine the airplane. Eclipse rarely met its commitments to the FAA or submitted a report on time. On 14 September 2006, an FAA meeting was convened in an Albuquerque hotel. In attendance were FAA personnel and 4 FAA executives. Among the executives was the service director, Mr. Hickey. It was completely clear to all present that the current approach of the software certification was not going to meet the Eclipse calendar schedule or Mr. Hickey's direction. In this meeting, the software engineer, Mr. Wallace, tried to convey to Mr. Hickey that the Eclipse approach would not meet the agency's established and time-tested software certification procedures. Mr. Wallace was summarily subjected to a verbal barrage that conveyed that he was not able to think outside the box. It was at this point I interjected myself between my employee and the service director. My taking up for him resulted in my dressing down and a humiliating verbal assault in front of my subordinates. In 35 years of public service as an Army officer and FAA employee, I have never suffered an experience as denigrating or unwarranted. It was clear to those present that Mr. Hickey was passionately making the case for thinking outside the box. However, the box must still be within the bounds of proven methodology and appropriate risk management. Some would portray this as passion. I would characterize it as an assault on our professionalism and our character. We left that meeting knowing that it was our responsibility, the FAA, not Eclipse, to find a compliant solution to the software issue. There are other issues that FAA personnel became aware of. The FAA became privy to a missent email detailing an Eclipse strategy to use Mr. Hickey's influence in the software certification issue. This Eclipse email stated that Mr. Hickey would have to force us to accept this alternate approach. It would be fair to note that no evidence exists this email was ever sent to Washington. However, it did serve notice that no Eclipse tactic was out of bounds. When you couple all this together, the pattern of misinformation, misstates, and a willingness to go straight to Washington, D.C., that left the field FAA personnel trapped between Eclipse and Mr. Hickey, and we knew it. Regarding the production program, Eclipse was trying to do too much with inadequate processes, poor controls, and untrained personnel. In March 2007, I received a phone call from Mr. Hickey. Vern Rayburn had called to complain. An email had been sent from Mr. Lauer to Mr. Byers at Eclipse explaining expectations for the reinspection and records review of aircraft serial number 3. From that phone call, and I paraphrase, Vern wants to know why the FAA wants the blankety-blank sealant records. I told Mr. Hickey I would find out. It was the same telecon I was also informed that Mr. Ron Rosner would assume oversight of the production manufacturing issues, and I was relieved. Back to the sealant records. After consulting with the experts, I learned sealant records have to be examined to ensure the shelf life has not been exceeded. This was a properly conducted FAA reinspection and records review. There is an Eclipse production certification report generated by Mr. Rosner to Ms. Baker. It portrays a story that is accurate in some regards, but also has a slanted factual inaccuracies that would make the inspectors look overbearing and zealous. It also contains misleading statements regarding myself and the Rotorcraft Directorate staff. The issues detailed are but a few of the issues the employees dealt with. The bigger cultural issue was the demonstrated lack of confidence in field FAA employees by Mr. Hickey and others. You will hear a different story from your subsequent panel. In fact, I expect to be maligned, disparaged, and at best displayed as incompetent. The record will speak for itself. The bigger concern is the tarnished reputation of field FAA employees involved, particularly the ones who tried to raise concerns. There are 250 other companies that the Directorate oversees. Nothing else comes close to this situation. Integrity is something I learned at the feet of my father, a 28-year career Army officer, and he is our patriarch. There are 3 generations of military service. One of my brothers is a serving Inspector General. I clearly understand the implications of these proceedings. My decision to leave the FAA was reached over a year ago. The Eclipse 500 program was the tipping point. It was clear to me that my value system and my leadership style were in conflict with senior leadership. It was time to close that chapter and move on. I have made mistakes in my career, but the handling of the Eclipse 500 program was not one of them. Pending your question, this completes my statement.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Chair now recognizes Mr. Wallace.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and all members of this committee. My name is Dennis Wallace. I am a software engineer employed by the FAA, and I am currently assigned to the Rotorcraft Certification Office in Fort Worth, Texas, as the FAA Software Technical Specialist. I have been employed by the FAA for the past 12 years. Prior to my employment with the FAA, I worked for the Department of Defense in various positions for 26 years. I am also a veteran of the United States Air Force, having served 4 years on active duty and 21 years on active reserve. I am here before you today to give an account of my recollection of the events and the final days leading up to the issuance of an FAA type certificate for the Eclipse 500 very light jet airplane. My specific role in this project was to provide typical FAA certification oversight of Eclipse and its suppliers' development of airborne software for this aircraft to ensure that it satisfied the safety requirements defined in the applicable federal aviation regulations. According to what the company submitted and FAA agreed to, Eclipse and its suppliers were to develop their software in accordance with the guidelines of RTC